Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. I've been running for a few years now and have the privilege of meeting many incredible runners on my travels all across the country. This podcast is intended to share those amazing conversations. Welcome back. I am here in Cambridge, Massachusetts with Kaitlin Goodman. Kaitlin, thanks for joining in today.
Thanks for having me.
For sure. We're doing another podcast with an Olympic trials runner, so thanks for popping on today.
Yeah.
First question, who is Kaitlin?
Who is Kaitlin? I wear many hats. I'm a dog mom.
Very important.
Very important. I'm a pro runner for the Boston Athletic Association and Adidas. I am a running coach at Training Joyfully. I do some public health consulting. I have my MPH in public health, and I love ice cream. That's a good. That's who I am.
Nice, I love it. So I love ice cream. That's a good close to that answer there. Okay, cool. So you do a whole bunch of different things, and one of those things is running at a professional level. And you've got a big race coming up in a couple weeks.
I do.
Let's dive right into that.
Yeah.
So Atlanta. What I think is super cool about you is that you've qualified for the trials in the 5,000, 10,000, and the marathon. So what's that like?
You know, that in 2016 to compete in all three events was awesome. I did not actually have a great marathon trials in 2016.
I don't think very many people did.
Yeah. Bad memories from LA.
Yeah.
But to be able to have the chance to come back on the track and kind of redeem myself, that was, really awesome to have that opportunity. The 10K is my favorite event. And so to have finally qualified in the 10, which has been my goal for many years, that was really special. And then the 5K was just kind of this like icing on the cake. We weren't shooting for it, but I happened to have a time that got me in, and, all the focus had been on the 10. And so just to have another chance to go back out there and really like have some fun and mix it up. It was really awesome.
Cool. And so what are the lessons that you learned from LA and what you did in 2016 that you're carrying forward to 2020 here?
Yeah, a lot of lessons from LA. I think that the part that I was disappointed in myself was how my mental game went once things went south. I felt like I had prepared physically really well. It was like my best build up to date. And I thought that I was prepared to handle anything. And then I obviously was not prepared for the heat and just, the sufferfest that it was out there. And so when things got hard, I wasn't really proud of how I approached the race mentally. And so ever since then, into the 2016 track trials and now, and beyond, it's just really, I really want to challenge myself that when things aren't going my way, whether you are, dry heaving because it's, 80 something degrees, or like I had some stomach issues in New York, whenever obstacle comes your way, just like really approaching, having a mindset of, what can I do? Not a defeatist mindset. And I bring that to training, if it's snowing, the weather's not going your way, or, you're having a fueling issue, or something in life is going on that's really challenging, that's impacting your performance. You control your attitude and your mental game. And I think if you can have a positive attitude and focus on what you can control, that's how you're able to get the most out of yourself from a performance perspective.
I love it. Devin Yanko calls it working the problem. And I think it's such a good way to look at it. So what do you do in that moment when you've acknowledged you have a problem or you have an acute issue?
Yeah. So I worked with a sports psychologist, Ro McGettigan. She wrote the Believe I Am training journal. Yeah. She's my neighbor in Providence. And she does some, sports psych work. And so she really encouraged me to take a body scan and say, okay, like my stomach has gone south and I have 10 more miles in the marathon. That doesn't feel good. But what does feel good? Like probably your legs are still feeling great. Your lungs are still doing well. So kind of instead of focusing on like, oh, my stomach, focus on something else that's feeling good and channel your energy there, and, take stock of what, you have still in your arsenal to compete with, and don't focus on the thing you've already lost.
Yeah,
the problem.
I think that's great. So I read a book called Mind Gym, and one of the points it makes is like a very simple one. You can't focus on two things at once. You can focus on something bad, or you can focus on something good. So I think there's something to be said for exactly what you said there. Like, take stock in what's working and shift the focus there.
Totally. And like, really focus on what you can control. Like, I think that's, runners, we tend to be rather type A. And when something's out of our control, that can feel really scary and, disconcerting.
Right.
It's not going to my race plan. And so, really being able to like think on your feet. And I tell the athletes that I coach, it's like, we do this in our jobs every day,
Right.
the folks who I'm coaching. And, I remind myself, like, I would get really anxious for races sometimes. And I was like, well, just approach this like you would like a presentation in grad school. I was like, I'm good at grad school. Wait, I'm good at running too, like, give yourself a little pep talk, and, don't get so anxious about that. Focus on what you can control and remind yourself that you can do hard things, and, makes the nerves go away, I guess.
That's awesome. So Training Joyfully, that's the name of your coaching business.
Yeah.
How did that name come about?
So my blog and my website is called Running Joyfully. And when I added a coaching component, I just kind of said, well, now I'm training people, so we're going to call it Training Joyfully. But the real origin of Running Joyfully, I totally like stole it from my dad. He's a high school cross country coach out in California. Been coaching for decades now. And he
Out in Davis, right?
Yes, Davis, California, my hometown.
Home of the famous In-N-Out on the way to Tahoe.
Right. Yes. That is the exit you have to take.
Yes.
It's also home to many bike lanes, which I know you'll appreciate.
Yes. Normally when I'm going out that way, I'm in a car, but...
But no one's going to park in the bike lane in Davis.
Oh, that's good to know.
Oh, yeah. Bike lanes are respected.
Unlike here in Brookline.
Right. But Running Joyfully. So my dad would tell all his high school athletes, we'd go on this run at cross country camp up at Donner Lake, and we're overlooking the lake, and we're in the mountains, and it's like beautiful and amazing. We're running with our teammates, and he'd tell all of us, when we got up to the top of the mountain, to remind ourselves that we're the luckiest kids alive to be out here and to run with joy. And, that really spoke to me. It's spoken to the thousands of athletes he's worked with. And so when I decided to run post-collegiately, that was the name of my blog, Running Joyfully in San Francisco at the time, and, bounced around a little bit, but Running Joyfully has been the common thread.
Awesome. And how do you bring that to what you do out there on the roads?
I think for me, it really means running with an attitude of gratitude for what my body can do. I've had some injuries in the last year and a half, and so I really had to like double down on that Running Joyfully piece, because there were many times it was not very joyful.
Do you look retrospectively at like what you've done in the past and have gratitude around, like, my body has allowed me to do this, it's currently injured?
When I was injured, I don't know if I was quite in the headspace to be able to, reflect with that gratitude. But like now that I'm healthy again, I just you remember those dark injured times. Right. I know, you can relate to that. Yes. And so, so now I'm just, grateful for whatever my body will give me any time out there. But it's more than that too, right? It's like, it's kind of, for me, you're out, whether it's, an urban run or you're, running in trails, you're outside, you're stepping away from whatever, issues you have, going on at home, whatever stressors you've got at work. This is your time. And so really kind of like running in the moment, being present, having an element of mindfulness to it, and trying to bring that like childlike joy almost to your run, and before running was like about specific splits and tempo pace. And, we could make running stressful if we want to. Right. So try to like go back to like, why did we do this in the first place? Oh, this is really awesome to go run for an hour with my friends outside. Beautiful day. Yeah.
So run for an hour with your friends.
Yeah. Best part of the day.
Yes. You have a lot of awesome training partners here in Boston, and I see you out there on the marathon course flying around and
trying.
Running 6-minute pace and making it look so easy. What's that like? What's it like training with a group like that that everybody is so high performing, where everyone is so high performing. And maybe let's back up and talk about BAA and joining that team. How did that come about?
Yeah. So I joined in the summer of 2018 and really was kind of seeking to have more training partners that were my speed. I had, I still live in Providence, and I had been running a bit with Molly Huddle and Emily Sisson, but Emily had just kind of taken off, and the days of running with them were no more.
You need a little more in your shoes.
Yeah, right. No, and they're spending a lot of time in Arizona now too. So I was really looking, for what I wanted to do in 2020. How was I going to make that next jump? And so in 2018, it seemed like a really good opportunity and the right fit. At the time, Katie Newton was on the team, and she and I had been doing a ton of races together, even though we weren't teammates yet. And we had that teammate relationship, and I was like, I really want to train with Katie. And so, got into talks with the BAA, and it was a good fit for both of us. And it was great. And that connected me, to a whole host of really talented folks, and just in Boston in general too. The running community is so fantastic. I knew Allie and Michaela Hackett before the BAA. They're from Rhode Island.
Right.
But, to be able to, be doing marathon build up stuff with them. And, I think Boston does a really great job too of like, it doesn't really matter what team you're on.
Yeah.
It's just, are you training for something and you have a big goal? Hey, you want to meet up and run? And, everyone's out in the marathon course, no matter who you're running for.
Yeah, it's so cool to see all the different teams working out together at Harvard or on the marathon course.
Yeah.
So were you out in Flagstaff a few weeks ago?
So I actually didn't go to Flag. Since I'm the only person on the high performance team who was doing the marathon trials, my coach and I talked about it, and like the timing of the trip was right as we were hitting some big workouts, and just like the time it takes to adjust to altitude. It just like didn't quite fit with the marathon stuff. Great for the track folks.
Right.
But there's no better place to train for the hills in Atlanta than Boston Marathon course.
Yeah.
So I've been on the course like almost every weekend, and a lot of heartbreak hills.
Yes. What's your favorite stretch of the Boston Marathon?
So my favorite place to spectate is actually right as you go over 95. It's like right before the Newton Hills.
16?
Yeah, right around 16.
Oh my God, that's my least favorite place in the whole course.
Which is why I want to cheer there, because people need cheers there. You're like just getting into the hills, and you're kind of like, oh man, it's about to get real hard, real fast.
I did a course preview of the last 16 miles, or the last 13 miles, something like that. Mm-hmm. And as I come down the hill out of Wellesley, and you get into that overpass, I believe the commentary was, "This part fucking sucks. There's no way around it. Like, I'm just gonna give it to you straight. Like, it sucks." Well,
it's brutal.
It's awesome that you're out there, because otherwise it sucks. That's cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you got your master's in public health.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I got my master's in public health. I started the fall of 2016. So basically after the Olympic cycle, after the trials, I had deferred a year actually. And I was like, all right, trials have come and gone.
Right.
Didn't make it to Rio. Time to go to grad school. So did 2 years at Brown, with a focus on physical activity promotion. And, it was fantastic. I love school. I contemplated the PhD, but that might be too much school for me.
Yeah.
But just had a really great experience. Got to do some research around physical activity promotion in South Africa, which was like this, awesome research on one hand, and then amazing running on the other hand. Partially why I went there.
Nice.
And I graduated in 2018.
So what were some of the projects you were working on?
So my particular focus was around obesity-related chronic disease,
Mm-hmm.
so diabetes, hypertension, and looking at what are barriers to people dealing with those chronic diseases, and then also facilitators.
Right.
We don't just want to look at, glass half empty,
right.
but what are things that people are doing to manage their disease that's really helpful, whether that's social support or, something in the community that's supporting them, and then how can we replicate what's working in other communities. So I got to do that in South Africa in a township outside of Cape Town. Historically, a very under-resourced community from the vestiges of apartheid, and a very under-resourced is the best way to frame it. And how are these women dealing with, very younger women, to have such severe diabetes and hypertension? What are they doing to be able to manage their disease? And
what were they doing?
So social support was like the big piece, to be able to engage in physical activity in that community. It's not very safe to be active. Right. It's not culturally, appropriate for women to be wearing pants. Once you have gotten married, you're generally wearing dresses or skirts. And even just like not having pants to exercise in was a barrier. You weren't allowed to go to the park. The security guards at the park would kick them out if they weren't wearing like gym shoes and pants. I was shocked to hear that. My sponsor at the time actually donated pants and exercise gear for the women. But having another woman who was going to, they wanted to go gym, as they said, we're gymming. If you wanted to go to the gym, together, that was like a big piece. And I totally related to that, right? It's snowing, it's raining, you don't want to get out the door. Yeah. But you got a teammate, a friend, and that gets you out the door, gets the job done.
Cool. Can any of what you learned in South Africa be applied to here in the States?
Yeah, I think, the parallels in terms of what barriers people are facing, when your economic status is directly impacting your ability to buy healthy food, your ability to have time to go exercise, how many jobs are you working? I think those are cross-cultural and, very applicable to communities here in the U.S. That are, resource challenged. And so, that was my hope to do something with my thesis. Of course, like most, graduate theses, it's sitting on a shelf somewhere and hasn't turned into anything.
Was communication research and communication a part of the educational process? Like how to communicate it?
That would have been like a second phase. So I was really, it was a qualitative study. So I was gathering all of these personal accounts through focus groups and interviews. And then ideally what someone would do with this research is then translate that into, into an intervention. Right. And that might have then a communication piece in the community. But, that was probably a good PhD project, but I didn't do the PhD.
So the reason I ask is a few weeks ago at Insight Tracker, we posted something about obesity on Instagram, and there was a little bit of backlash and some dissenting opinions, and we come at it from a very scientific approach with almost no emotion, probably too little emotion tied to it. And it caused for a pretty interesting discussion internally coming from the top. So our CEO said, whoa, now let's talk about this. And, that's not how we want to be presenting our not our stance, but our position on it. We're humans. Everybody's human. We're scientists, but we're humans. So how do you think we can better, we as in like Americans, how do we better communicate the information around obesity while also acknowledging we have the health at any size movement? We have people who are saying, you don't need to, be, have, get your BMI down, things like that. Yeah. There are so many different pieces at play. How do you take the science and turn that into something that's helpful?
You're coming with the hard questions, John. So these are like tough questions, exactly, that we would, talk about in grad school. So I think societally we struggle with, how you're framing people and judging people based on their weight. Right. And, that's not an okay way to be talking about, anyone, and I think sometimes we fail to think about the social determinants of health. We look at obesity as this is an individual problem that lies with the individual.
Right.
That's wrong. We know that from science that social determinants of health, where you live, there's literally like by your zip code, that
it predispose like
risk factors for your health. And, we look at so many different variables that come into play. And I think it's, there's so many levels that we fail to think about sometimes in the communication piece. So when we think about where to intervene for obesity and obesity related chronic disease, I really want to move upstream and like look at our food system and how much it costs to purchase a healthy salad versus the dollar menu at McDonald's, or look at the cost of sugar sweetened beverages versus, a healthier beverage. And so, that kind of removes any sort of individual decision making. If you go far enough up the chain, right? How do we communicate that to policymakers, to individuals? That's really hard. We would both be rich if we knew the answer to that. But yeah, I think, with any public health problem, whether we're talking about the opioid epidemic or obesity or gun violence, it's just being really sensitive. And like you said, we're all human, and just making sure that our communication has a focus on, we're all human. No one's doing anything,
No, we're not robots.
Yeah. So.
Cool. Let's jump back over to running for a bit.
Yeah. Nerding out on public health.
No, it's great. So I think that some of the feedback I've got on this podcast is that people enjoy hearing about, what's going on behind the scenes, or what people do outside of running. And it's super cool when we can dive into something like this and hear about, I was reading a piece from Wazelle on Ali Kiefer, and there was a question that said, what do you tell people when they ask what you do? And she says, I have a flexible job, because she doesn't like talking about it. She likes talking about the other things that she does in her life. And there are so many people that are just seem one dimensional, but they're not. And so I love when we can, pull those stories out and pull that information out and talk about something like this that impacts tons of people. But back over to running.
Yeah.
So
here, I'll add one thing on that. So I just listened to Lauren Fleshman on the Rich Roll podcast, and I really loved how she was talking about from her coaching. She really focuses on like the whole person.
Yeah.
And so I think, kudos to Ali for saying that, and Wazelle, and because I think we are so often just typecast as like, we're just running, and then we're chilling in our Normatex, and then we're having our smoothie or whatever. And that's like our whole day.
And then what happens when you're injured?
Right. Well, I mean, I super struggled with that, right? I adopted a dog, and I didn't even like dogs. I mean, I do
like
now.
Dogs now.
I love dogs now.
Nice.
Obsessed. But yeah, no, I think I really thrive when I focus on that whole personhood, and I really still look up to Lauren as a mentor and a role model, because she's running picky bars, and she's writing books, and
doing retreats
and running really fast.
Yeah.
And so I think that wasn't always like supported in some of the situations I was in, and I think I actually really do my best. Like, I ran my 10K PR, going to grad school and coaching runners, and so I think we do a disservice sometimes to be like, oh, we're just professional runners. Yeah. So
my coach David Roche said something recently, or not recently, it was a while ago, and I wish I could get the quote exactly as he said it, but it was something along the lines of like, never sacrifice life for running.
Totally.
And if you're ever making a decision of, should I do this or that, and running is the determining factor, it's time to take a step back and understand and reevaluate, where you're at. And I think that pendulum swings in the wrong way too far sometimes.
Yeah.
And you need to take a look at where you're at sometimes and understand that. And sometimes you can choose to let it swing one way or another, and sometimes you can't.
And to be
it's
successful,
like forced on you. Yeah.
Like sometimes you gotta, ask my husband. It is all Olympic trials marathon right now, and like probably not super fun for him, because every weekend's about a long run.
Right.
But
a longer long run too.
Yes, and longer and harder, and and then I'm useless for the rest of the day. but then, and then there's time, like we're going on vacation right after the marathon.
Right.
And so, I like the pendulum. Things ebb and flow, and there's times to be all in and all focused, and then there's times where you got to be a person a little bit.
So balance is something I talk about a lot on this podcast.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because the majority of people are elite or professional athletes. And so it's someone who has done well at something to get where they're at today.
Yeah.
And so you see these commonalities of what it takes to be a high performer. And what's been fascinating I've done 55 podcasts now, and
so many of them.
Yeah, and
I can't listen to them all. I can't keep up.
And the commonality is that it's you have to appreciate the ins and outs and the day to day, and it's never a single focus. It's never just the marathon. It's never just the marathon trials. It's never just the whatever the tangible outcome is, but it's the process and gratitude and enjoyment.
Totally.
And then the other piece is understanding that you can't do everything, and you can't, like Magda Boulay said it best, probably episode 10 or something like that. And she said, I'm not balanced, but what is important to me is at the end of the day, if I come home and I can look at my son in the eyes, or I look at my husband and say, today was a good day. Her husband's happy, her son's happy, her dog is happy. She did her thing at work, and her employees are happy, things like that. Those are the boxes that she checks on a daily basis, and everything else is, gravy.
Yeah.
Or, add running into that as well. But
right.
Everything else is gravy, and it's about prioritization versus, trying to be average at too many things.
Yeah. I mean, I I've struggled with that in the past, right? It's like, do you want to be doing a lot of different things and you kind of like don't feel like
doing
you're
them okay,
succeeding at any single one of them? Yeah. That's where I've looked to Lauren, honestly, a lot, and like, look at her as a role model and say, okay, how is she like slicing and dicing her time? Because it's easy to, I think, the type A in us, right? Like,
want to be good at everything,
right?
Yeah.
But also, that can be your downfall sometimes too. And so
I think she buckets it really well. And the name of her podcast with her husband, Jesse, is Work, Play, Love. And those are the buckets that matter most.
Totally.
And that's where they spend their time.
Yeah.
So I think that's super cool. Okay, so now back to running. One of your athletes who's also running the trials, Amanda Nurse, wants to know.
Amanda asked a question.
What are your predictions for the marathon trials? And are you going to include yourself in this prediction? Who's making the team?
Good question. I mean, this year more than any year, so many women could make the team. And I think that's twofold. One, because women's running is just like on fire right now.
And I definitely want to talk about that next.
Okay. All right.
So let's put a pin in that for now.
Okay. But, I think the big wild card is going to be the course.
Yeah.
And I've run a fair number of miles with Molly and Emily, and I ran for Ray Tracy in the past, and Ray gets people ready to go, and Molly and Emily just they show up. And I mean, how many titles does Molly have? And
a lot.
The marathon, Emily was made for it. So I feel like putting those two on the list, I think they're going to be in the mix. And I got to say, Sarah Hall. I think Sarah's another person I really look up to. I think she is just totally running with joy these days, and you see it. And she's figured out this balance piece, right? With her family and her own running and her marriage and, the focus on her career right now. I would love for Sarah to make the team.
I love what she's doing.
Yeah.
Normally, I don't like serial racing. or people who promote it, but the way that she's doing it is fascinating.
And it's all about fun for her.
It's all about fun. She's like, this is fun, and totally. I feel good. So I had her on the podcast when I was out in Flagstaff, and she was so happy, and
she's living her joy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's just like happiness, and these subjective measures of success, I think, are huge.
And that's how you get the most out of yourself.
Yeah,
that's why I think she's dangerous.
Yeah,
man.
I call it the stoke meter. And if your stoke meter is all the way up, you're in for a good day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to see Sarah do some pretty cool things. So you didn't mention any Nike athletes, which I find interesting. There's a lot going on in the running world when it comes to shoes, and I have not stopped talking about shoes in the last
damn shoes
in the last 2 weeks. These damn shoes, right? I did an interview with Cindy Kuzma from
I love Cindy.
Runner's World, and she's doing an article about the downside of the shoes.
Yeah,
and I think that we're in for a rude awakening in the next few months or years, because a lot of people are not responding well to these shoes, myself included. I think I'm injured partly because of these shoes and the way that they return energy into potentially the wrong places.
It's like going from like when the barefoot movement was a thing, and it's like, okay, well, we all grew up wearing these regular running shoes. You can't just go run barefoot.
Right.
You've trained for years, in one.
It's the pendulum. We went too far one way, and now we're too far the other way.
Right.
And a bunch of people are going to get injured over here, and a bunch of people are going to get injured over here, and then we're going to settle back in the middle.
I mean, the injury piece I think is certainly important, but I mean more from like an even playing field piece. I was really disappointed to see that the Alpha Flies were approved, and it feels very convenient that they used a men's 8.5 to measure the stack height that conveniently was under the 40 millimeter,
by a half a millimeter.
Yeah. I don't know how many men wear an 8.5. Like I worked at a running store. All right,
very few.
But we didn't stock a lot when I worked in a running store. It was like men's size 10 was like your average size.
Right.
So why are we measuring the men's 8.5?
Right.
I look at it as like the swimsuits in swimming however many years ago. And I think I don't want to, stop any innovation. I think innovation is great. I think that, we're not running in the shoes that Roger Bannister wore, right? But I do think I want to step on the starting line and have it be about who's the fittest person here, who's prepared for this course in Atlanta, not do you have, extra stuff under your feet and an Alpha Fly. So who knows? I didn't not mention Nike athletes because of the shoes. Right. I mean, I think, Jordan and Amy have both struggled with injuries, and, as a fellow person having dealt with injuries, I can empathize with where they are. So
Amy did win a half marathon today.
I did see that.
Yeah.
I did see that. So who knows? I mean, I didn't mention Des, and Des is obviously super fit. So it's
about enjoying the process and enjoying the journey.
Yeah.
She's doing it right.
Totally. So I think anyone who's really like living their joy out on the race course, not doing what I did in LA in 2016, those are the people who are going to be dangerous, right? Yeah. And so, my hope is for all 500 women of us out there that we can just like have the most joyful expression of this journey over those 26.2 miles.
So 500 women, that's almost twice as many as the number that qualified for LA, right?
Yeah,
and it's almost twice as many men that are racing.
The men got to step up.
So what's going on with women's running?
I think Lindsay Krause said it best in her New York Times article. I cried when I read that because I was like, oh, this is everything I believe about running.
She's doing amazing things.
Yeah. Lindsay is phenomenal. But yeah, I really think it's like women supporting women and people seeing something that their training partner, that their friend, that someone on Instagram is doing and saying, why not me?
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally how I got into the sport. My PR out of college was 34:01 in the 10K. And I was like, I want to be a professional runner. I mean, to any 34:01 runners out there, go for it.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was maybe like a little bit foolish.
And now you're 32?
31:55. Yeah. But, at the time, I like took a bet on myself because I watched the Olympic trials in 2008 and I watched the 10K and I said, wait, I think I can do that. And I was so inspired by the women on the track. And then, here I am 12 years later. And I think the same thing has just happened with a ripple effect. And I don't know why it's not happening with the men as much. I think the women, we see a lot of women in that like 30 to 40 age group who are coming back to the sport after kids and, finding their power a little bit later in their running career. And I don't think we see as many men in that age group chasing that dream.
Do you think it's because of the aspirational factor? Like you look at someone who's doing it and you think I can do it too. And I think there are a lot more women that are more vocal and, Instagram or Twitter or there are a lot more women that are active and setting, I don't want to say setting the tone, but like showing that it's possible. And then you get a guy like Peter Bromka or Tommy Tommy Puzzy, Ribs Puzzy. But then I can't think of any other examples of people that have put themselves out there and men who have put themselves out there and to try and get that 219. Do you think that the relatability factor is a part of it?
Totally. And I think, the social media piece is big, and maybe, there are more women like kind of shouting it from the rooftops.
Right. Like, hey, you can do it too.
Yeah. And I think it's like a really supportive environment. Like I've raced CIM, I've cheered at CIM, like everybody wants everyone else.
Right.
It's like you're immediately part of this team when you step on the starting line. And I know the men are experiencing that too. So I don't quite know. I mean, I think, I wish I knew, but it's awesome and we need more of it.
So you gave some guesses on the women's side. What do you think on the men's side?
I really would love to see Jared Ward back out there.
Yeah.
I've gotten to become friends with Jared over the years. We do this race every year in Green Bay, Wisconsin, the Bellin Run. And I've gotten to hang out with him there. And like, he is just the real deal. Like Sarah, right? He's totally living his joy. And he's just such a shining example of like hard work. And so I would just love for him to make the team. And he's been on fire. I would love to see my brother make the team. My brother ran 211 in Chicago. I think he's as fit as any other 211 guy out there. And, behind Jared, I think there's some spots to be had. I know Galen just had a nice race this weekend. I have some thoughts about Galen that I probably shouldn't say, so I'll leave it at that. I hope he's not on the team. So go all those 211 guys.
What do you think about, do you follow Jim Walmsley at all?
Not on Strava, but I know Jim's been throwing down. Yeah. I think I see it from my Twitter feed from you.
Yeah, I mean, a couple 175-mile weeks. And
talk about balance. I don't know about balance there, Jim, but
so there was a Sports Illustrated article that Chris Chavez wrote that came out yesterday.
Oh, I gotta read that.
He's just a dude that loves beer and pizza and running a ton of miles.
Good for him. That sounds like loving ice cream. Love beer and pizza.
Exactly.
Sure.
But I think he could be. It could be interesting.
True. I mean, that's why I'm like so excited for Atlanta, right? Like I could have said 3 names and they could make the team.
Right.
You could have said 3 different names and they equally could make the team.
I think the course will eat a few people.
That course is hard. Oh my God. I did the preview.
Yeah, you did the preview. So where do you suggest spectating from?
I mean, anywhere on Peachtree, like you'll be able to see us 6 times, but everything's going to happen in that last 5K. The loop that we don't repeat on, that's only the final stretch.
Down Hank Aaron.
I don't know the name of it, but it's when we go into the Olympic rings and make our way back. When I did the preview, that was so hard. I was like, I feel like I'm going to have to like walk up one of these hills. And we were only running 8 miles in the preview. It's going to be really tough. So whoever is, really ready for those hills, then, I would go position yourself in that last 5K.
So that's what we were thinking. We have a house rented down there,
nice.
And it's like a quarter mile from the Hank Aaron.
Okay, the straight shot down to the rings
and back up.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll hit the turnaround, but it would be so fun to see. 6
people are going to be
times.
suffering down there.
Yeah,
probably me too.
Yes.
All of us.
So something you mentioned earlier, I wanted to come back to.
Yeah.
Before we started talking, you were talking about pros hiding their training or whatnot. A question from Instagram was, how do you approach training without injury or pressure to hit higher mileage weeks when other pros are so public with their workouts?
Maybe I should be the pro who's public about my lower mileage because, yeah, I think there's a lot of loud voices on social media, on Strava, Jim for running these 175 mile weeks.
One was 176.
Kudos to him. I would be broken about 100 miles before that. I think there's so many different ways to be a successful marathoner, and what works for me might not work for you. When I am coaching people, every single plan looks different. Probably not the best business model, but great for coaching, I think.
Great for results.
Right. Because, if I were to do Kellen Taylor's training, probably wouldn't work for me. I probably would be injured. I know, especially coming back from an injury, I'm on way lower volume than I was in past marathon buildups, but I'm crushing it on the bike and in the pool and hitting workouts like better than I ever have. And so I think it's so easy to say, oh, well, John's doing this and John just kicked butt at this race. Well, I want to do what John's doing. And it's easy to fall into that. So I think really just, if you're working with a coach, trust your coach. And if you're not, like, just really trust your body. And that sounds so simple. I think it's a really hard thing to do, is really have faith in your training and have the self-awareness of your body to know when to take a rest day and be okay with it. I think it's another Lauren Fleshman-ism, but she was saying it takes guts to rest when everyone around you is just working.
Right.
But I've really found like less is more, and I'm, maybe I'll make my training public someday. I don't know. But
are you on Strava?
Yeah, I share probably half my training on Strava. Yeah.
Got it. So why do you choose not to?
Originally, a coach had asked me not to, just, kind of out of respect for, the training he was giving, don't give away training secrets on there. So it was kind of out of respect for him. And yeah, I think, you want to keep something private from your competitors, right? I don't need all the people I'm racing in Atlanta to know exactly what I've done.
Hill workouts every other day.
I'm not doing that.
What are you afraid of?
That's a good question. Well, the public health person in me is really scared of the coronavirus right now. No, I'm a super germaphobe. So I am in these 3 weeks counting down, scared of any sort of more the flu, domestic flu, not coronavirus. But what am I afraid of?
So no public transportation for you?
A lot of hand sanitizer. No, I think I'm afraid of not seizing opportunities in front of me. And whether that's in running, that's in my career, that's in, my personal life, I just want to, I want to take all those chances and grasp all those opportunities. And I'm scared of not doing that sometimes. If I don't make the most of the opportunity in Atlanta, I think I will have regrets, and that scares me.
What does success look like in Atlanta?
Success in Atlanta is exactly what we're talking about. Grasping that opportunity in front of me and knowing that I left every little bit of myself out there. And and that doesn't really matter what the time or the place is. I know, like, I had a really crappy run in New York, ran the back half about the pace I do recovery runs. Really struggled, but I am so proud of that performance because I really did seize that moment, even though the moment was terrible.
Right.
I squeezed every bit out of myself. And so even though that's my slowest marathon, I'm really proud of that.
So I feel the same way. I ran, I was trying to break 3 and I ran a 4:01 at Boston 2017.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the runs I'm most proud of because it would be so easy to give up. But once you give up once, it's a slippery slope. Yeah. So being able to persevere through something like that is so powerful. Does that fear come from a place of has that happened before where you had a awesome opportunity that you let go, or is that just sort of a I don't want to let this happen?
I mean, I kind of feel that way about my run in LA
Yeah.
in 2016. But I think also, like, I just turned 33. I'm not getting any younger. Obviously, Des and Shalane are having their best performances older than I am. So
Right.
there's more in the future for me. But I think with the injury I had and, just not knowing how many more years I'm going to have the chance to do this, like, that scares me. Like, to know that I'm in the shape of my life and to not capitalize on that.
Yeah.
That's scary, right? It's a good motivator too.
Right. Yeah. I think it's a good balance of like appreciation of what you have and
Yes.
willingness to get after it
Yeah,
hard.
totally.
So what are you doing after the trials?
We are flying to Croatia.
That's
actually.
awesome.
Yeah. So, right from Atlanta. Send my sweaty running clothes back with a friend, and
That's a good airport to fly internationally out of, I guess.
yeah. So, my husband with his work schedule, we can't always take vacation when we want to, and we know the week after a marathon, usually I'm not doing too much running,
Right.
although I really want to because running in Croatia looks amazing. So, so we're just gonna go kind of nerd out on the Game of Thrones sites,
Nice.
and I'm excited.
Do you have any athletes racing besides Amanda?
In the trials, no. I had a few who were, coming up close, chasing that 245,
Yeah.
totally part of that, group of women running down big dreams. But yeah, Amanda is the only athlete I'm coaching who's running the trials.
Got it.
It's going to be fun to like toe the line with her. And, she is just like ready to roll right now. I'm really excited for what
I
she's
think
going to do.
she's in a place of gratitude also right now.
Totally.
And,
We've
and
talked a
seizing
lot
a
about
moment.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another question I have at the intersection of the public health and running,
Mhm.
let's talk Mary Kane and everything she brought forward.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
We got to go somewhere. There was
Yeah.
just an article today about a really similar,
A Canadian
tragic story
athlete?
in Canada. Yeah. And I think there's more stories that just haven't been told here in the US. And I think that the challenge really comes from these power dynamics of these male coaches, older male coaches in positions of power, whether they're controlling scholarship dollars or, Nike contract dollars or whatnot. They're wielding this power with these young girls. They really are girls at this
Right.
age. And because they are in such an unequal power dynamic, they can't advocate for what they need. And they're often acting out of fear. And so I think having more women coaches, but I don't think just women coaches is the right example. Like, I've
Right.
had many stellar male coaches that are,
Yeah, I think that's an easy answer.
Right.
That's probably not it.
Yeah. I mean, I think more women just should be coaching, period. Not
Yeah.
because of everything that happened
Or
to
in
Mary.
positions of power.
Yes. And just, so other women look up to that
Right.
as a career you could aspire to.
Right.
But I think, it goes back to what we were talking about, like with balance. I think it sounds like Alberto's stance is like a win at all cost, at the detriment of your physical and mental health.
Which
And
works for 18 months.
if that.
If that, yeah. But then you're
Yeah.
destroyed.
Right. And you've taken all the joy out of
Right.
running forever.
Right.
I'm really glad to see Mary back racing again.
Yeah.
But I wonder if Mary had like a regular college career where she was in the NCAA, she had teammates who were her age. Hopefully she'd go to a party and have some beer after a race, live a little.
Yeah.
Not saying the NCAA system is perfect. There's these predatory coaches there too.
Right.
But I think just starting to have the conversation, and people a lot smarter than I am coming up with some solutions here. But I think just starting to have the conversation is step one. And then having our governing bodies really intervene too. With the Canadian piece, I was really disappointed to hear how Athletics Canada did not pursue these
Right.
allegations. So holding people accountable.
Yeah, I think awareness is an easy first step, but it's
only the first step.
right. It's only the first step, and it's education and, as you said, the top of the food chain versus the individual cases, whether it's
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think when like we have to look at, follow the money, right? Like for some of these college coaches, they're incentivized to focus on the 4 years that their athlete is with them.
Right.
A win at all costs attitude. And
if they flake out from there.
Right. They're not looking at their longevity. And so are we changing the financial incentives such that it's not about winning NCAAs for this coach? Maybe, I think Lauren Fleshman mentioned this, but like a metric is how many of your women are running post-college.
In 5 years.
I know from my dad as a high school coach, there's no money there in high school, but you do it for the love of it. But like
a bonus structure for how many athletes graduate and continue running.
That's a marker of a healthy, happy athlete, hopefully. But like for my dad, that's a really important metric for him is like how many of his athletes, whether we're running in college or you're joining the triathlon team or you're just running for health and fitness, like that's the marker of success for him. Even, 15 years later, he has athletes come back.
The problem is aligning a goal like that with
dollars.
Totally. And it's crude, but at the end of the day, that's what's going to make change.
Right. I mean, that's just part of it. I think the education piece too, but people can fall asleep in webinars. People can, check the box and say they did this training.
Yeah, but I think the education around energy deficit and eating and nutrition and vitamin D and bone health and things like that. Like, I think there's massive under awareness. Is that a word? Lack of knowledge, lack of awareness around these things that are so crucial. Like we look at vitamin D with Insight Tracker and
for bone health,
35% of our users are clinically deficient.
I've been low.
Yeah. And it puts you at, I think the statistic for energy deficit is you're 5 times more likely to get a bone injury.
Totally.
I don't know what the number is for vitamin D deficiency, but there was a study done by the Pittsburgh Steelers, so totally different sport, but it looked at athletes with a vitamin D deficiency, and 80% of the athletes on the injured reserve, and I think I'm getting this right. I'll double check it and put in the notes on this one because I need to get this one right. It was something 80 or 90% of the athletes that missed time in this season, I think it was 2016, had a vitamin D deficiency. And it's not a direct correlation or whatnot, but I think it's definitely
worth further probing.
Exactly. And the number of people that know their vitamin D level, probably pretty low. So I think that there's so much awareness that needs to be done. And you look at Kara Goucher and you look at Lauren Fleshman, and they have these loud voices, and they're shouting from the rooftops, and it's finally starting to have an impact. And I think it's awesome.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, I've had conversations with some of my athletes about this. I will say, I think sometimes, like, my college experience, we were talking about diet. We had a world-renowned researcher on nutrition who was speaking with all the student athletes. So I think some teams and some schools are doing it well, but I think there's still, it's a scary thing to talk about. It's a hard thing to talk about. So even if the knowledge is there, the way to have an understanding conversation is still difficult. And
the resources around making changes are probably not there.
Again, go back to the dollars.
Yeah.
So I was on a panel speaking to high school and college coaches this summer, and I got a lot of questions about, okay, we know some of this research. We know this is important. We know our athletes, men and women, are at risk for disordered eating. What can I do as a coach? And that was what they were asking for. How do I have these hard conversations? And I don't pretend to know the answer. I can just share from my personal experience. But again, it's like going back to coming at it from a place of empathy. It's not about how fast you're running and how much you weigh. It's, going back to how can I support you to get the most out of yourself, seize those opportunities in front of you.
And get the Stoke meter up.
Yes, totally. So yeah, having some compassion. When I hear these stories, it sounds like those coaches did not have a lot of compassion for the whole human.
Right.
It was all about the medals, all about the times. And that sucks out all the joy, all the stoke.
Yeah. So let's end on a happy note here.
Yeah, sorry.
What is your mantra for Atlanta?
Ooh, I'm going to have a ton. I like to have different ones for different miles.
Yeah.
One of them, I had this on my bottle, taped on my bottle in New York, is Moose Miles. So Moose is my dog,
yeah.
and he's not a great runner, but much to my chagrin. But he loves it.
Yeah.
When we do run all of like 2 miles, tongue out, he's smiling, he loves it, and he gets lots of treats when he's done. So
Same.
right. Ice cream. So my hope is just to kind of like embody his like
That's awesome.
pure fun of it. And like, I just want to have so much fun out in Atlanta. So
amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see you out there, whether it's 6 times or just once in the last 5K.
I'm going to need the cheer.
To be determined.
Yeah.
So I had Lou Serafini on the podcast, and he said, if you see me on the course, tell me to slow down. If we see you on the course, what should we tell you?
Moose Miles.
Moose Miles. All right.
Yell it.
We're yelling Moose Miles at Kaitlin. Well, thanks so much, and we'll see you out there.
Thanks, John.
For sure. That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next week on For the Long Run. And in the meantime, happy trails. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too. Tune in next week for a special Olympic Trials preview episode with Erin Strout of Women's Running Magazine. I'll be releasing this on Thursday instead of Friday so that you can have an extra day to listen ahead of Saturday's Olympic Marathon Trials down in Atlanta. Enjoy!